Welcome to the Women of Ambition podcast. I'm your host, Alyssa Calder Hulme. The Women of Ambition podcast explores women's ambition. First, the radical act of acknowledging it within ourselves. Second, allowing space to explore what ambition means for each of us. And third, harnessing and developing our drive. The word ambition is so frequently misused and misconstrued. I define ambition as a neutral personality trait, an inner drive, to do or achieve success, typically requiring determination and hard work. One of my goals is to show how this trait is exhibited in women's lives, regardless of job title or financial compensation. Meaning is found when we couple this neutral trait with our deepest values and life purposes. As we learn from each other, my goal is to destigmatize ambition for women and help women harness their drive to align with their unique values to create a joy-fueled life of achievement. Welcome to Season 3. This season, we'll be looking at the various applications and intersections of ambitious women in 6 different areas of life. So goals, relationships, health, careers, play, and in service to the world. We'll take several weeks to explore each of these areas and speak to experts on the various topics. Our first topic is goal setting. What does goal setting look like for ambitious women? So today is going to be my process and my story with goal setting, and in the coming weeks we'll hear from other people. This is a process I've developed over time after getting to know myself. This is one way of goal setting. There are many ways to do this, and honestly, my way is pretty intense. I don't expect everyone to go about it this way, so feel free to take away anything that works for you or would stretch you or sounds good and just ditch the rest. I'm also able to do everything that I'm about to share because I've worked through a lot of my limiting beliefs in personal development and in therapy, and I've gained a lot of really great skills along the way. A few years ago, my only goal was to start trauma therapy, and that therapy took up pretty much all of my time and energy and focus, physical strength even. Now that I've worked through all of that stuff and I've healed so much of that inner stuff, I am free to get down to the business of creating my life and setting the world on fire. So with that understanding, I'm going to share what works for me now. I start my New Year's planning in the fall. I know that's not popular right now. A lot of people are talking about New Year's resolutions and how it's lame to start on January 1st. But for me, I know myself, and I feel the energy of a new year and get really excited about it starting several months in advance. When those leaves start to turn colors and they go from green to gold to red, that, I don't know, it clicks in my brain that the year is ending and I have an opportunity to start fresh. It also reminds me to check up on some of my past goals and end the year off really strong. The years when I allow myself time and space to ride that wave have been my most successful years. When I try and wait until after Christmas to start setting goals, I never have enough time. A week is not enough time to do this if you haven't done any of the legwork. When I start after Christmas, I end up setting goals that I can't sustain long term. They aren't really in a line, and I just end up discarding them along the way. So I start in October. That works for me. What that looks like is in October, I start to evaluate the year that I've had and finishing anything up in that last quarter that I haven't done that year. November is when I start to think about the future. And by December, I'm ready to start setting some realistic goals because I've put a lot of time and intention just into thoughts at this point. These are just things that I think about during the day. So when I am ready to sit down and start writing out some goals, usually about mid-December, the very first thing I have to do is a brain dump because inevitably I have some things I'm really excited about for the next year that I want to implement. And if I try and hold those in my brain and also take inventory of the previous year, I'm inevitably it's not going to be optimal. I'm either going to forget the things that I really want to work on for next year, or I'm not going to be able to be fully engaged in my review because I'm trying to hold too many things in my brain. So brain dump. Next, I think about the previous year and I write down my favorite memories. And I usually fill a page in my journal. There's like 20 rows, 20 lines in this book, and I just go top to bottom and fill it out. Anything that comes to mind. I also like to look at things like pictures of the last year, Instagram posts, some examples. Some of my favorite memories from the last year has been podcast interviews that I've done. I get this like high afterwards. I get in this flow state of creativity and synergy and energy. And it's a really fantastic place that I get to after interacting with these awesome people. So thank you for all of our guests, past, present, and future. Second one is getting my Reiki practitioner certification. Visiting Yosemite and Redwoods with my family. We did another big RV trip and so many incredible memories. Going to Crater Lake and seeing how truly turquoise that water is. Hitting podcasting goals. And then, less tangible things like coming to a new level of understanding and communication with my husband. We've been working on some of our marriage skills and relationship skills and have kind of come to a new level in this last year, and just enjoying being in that space counted as one of my favorite memories of the last year. My next thing is I write down accomplishments from the last year. Same kind of thing, just a page in my journal, things that come to mind and things that I have jotted down. So I went to my first writing conference. That was something that I did this year. I hired a sitter to help me make space in my life to get things done that were on my goal list. And I know that sounds probably not super impressive to a lot of people, but hiring a daytime sitter was a big accomplishment for me for a lot of reasons. But I was really happy that I did that, and it counts as an accomplishment. This year, I created a podcast. The podcast is now almost a year old. My first episode, I believe, came out in February, and I first had the idea for it at the end of January. But it's something that I did this year that I accomplished. I did 2 seasons, 20 episodes, and different milestones along the way that were really impactful for me. My first 1,000 listeners, my first 2,000 listeners, watching those numbers ramp up so quickly, and then a mid-year goal that I set of getting a sponsor, accomplishing that was fantastic. So then I like to write down all of my accomplishments from the last year. So slightly different from favorite memories. Sometimes there's overlap, but this can be goals that I have set and completed, but then also things that I had no idea I was going to accomplish this year. So this year, I went to my first writing conference. I went to my first podcasting conference. I hired a sitter to help make space to meet some of my goals from last year. My husband and I were able to save up this really large sum of money, which I didn't know if it was going to happen this year. I knew it would happen eventually, but we were able to do it this year, and that felt really fantastic. I also created this podcast in this last year. It wasn't part of my original plan back last December when I was writing out my goals, but it ended up fitting into the larger context of where I wanted to go with my life. And we're going to talk a little bit more specifically about that. But then as I created the podcast, I had these other things that I accomplished along the way. So my first 1,000 listeners, my first 2,000 listeners, and watching those numbers ramp up so quickly, and then setting the mid-year goal of getting a sponsor for the podcast and getting that through the end of the year. Each of those moments were fantastic. And so in writing down these favorite memories and then these accomplishments, I'm catching on and remembering the energy of the year and of getting those things done and how good that felt. And I'm trying to recall that, pat myself on the back for things that I've done, and then also give myself an energetic boost for next year. Next, I imagine my ideal life. And this isn't a career or, things that I can check off on a box. This is more of a feeling. What kind of a feeling do I want to have in my body, in my soul, in my home, in my relationships? What kind of tone do I want to live with? So for me, this means living in peace, feeling grounded, having a home life that is smooth and loving, becoming the person I want my children to feel free to become. So for me, this means pursuing passions and making world contributions. I want to have time and space to create, and I want to have a sense of contributing to the world for good. I want to have health. I want to have independence and creative freedom. Now, obviously, none of those are really goals, right? These are places I want to be, feelings I want to have. Nothing's really concrete. So compare that ideal life that I want right now to what I wanted in the previous years. And this is something I still record in my journal. And I see, did my dream life really change that much? And what's really cool is for the past few years, my dream life hasn't really changed. My goals have been really consistent. I've been building and getting closer and closer, and then enjoying that dream life kind of along the way. So I like comparing what is my life like now and where do I want it to go. And what I found, especially this year, is I'm actually really living that life. My dream life, I'm living that now. I'm living a version of that now. And so then I ask, what can I do to take this up a notch? What can I do to live even more deeply in that space of peace and grounding and my home life running smoothly and health? Like, how do I take that to the next level? What does that look like for me? So as an example, last year, I really wanted to network with more awesome women and be inspired and contribute something into the world. And so now I can take that and I can bring that even more into the concrete space. And I have my podcast now, and I know that I can interview these women, and what it's going to look like when I make this contribution. It's going to be in a podcast format. And how can I optimize that? And how can I take that continually to the next level to meet my needs and my goals? For health, I've done all kinds of things in the last year. I did a sleep study. I've adjusted food intake and medications. I recently got an ADHD diagnosis. And so that's going to be an area that I continually work on in the next year, is educating myself about neurodiversity, adjusting medications, working with doctors to take that health to the next level. Next, I review last year's goals and ask myself what worked, what didn't happen and why, and what have I learned about myself through both of those situations, and what things got in the way. Sometimes there are circumstances outside of our control, COVID, cough, cough. And sometimes there are things in my control that I didn't do for whatever reason. So I look at what pivots did I have to make, and did I stay aligned with my greater purpose along the way. So these are the things that I can say yes to this year. I set a goal to graduate therapy, and with the blessing of my therapist, I have done that. I no longer have a need to go to weekly therapy. I've healed a lot of deeper things. So weekly therapy is over. I still go for maintenance things here and there, and I still am continually learning new tools, but I no longer have to dedicate quite as much mental space, emotional space, space on my weekly calendar for that purpose. And that is great because it means I'm in a healthier place now than I was several years ago when I started. Another thing was to go to marriage counseling with my husband, and we have done that. And that has been another opportunity to learn skills and improve our relationship. I'm so grateful that I set that goal. We did that together because it does take two. And we've both really seen the value in that, and it's been awesome. Another one is to go to my first writers conference. I did that. Another is to save that big chunk of money. I didn't have a timeline associated with doing that. I just knew that I would really like to do that this year. I didn't know what situations might arise to make that happen, but they did arise, and we did make it happen. So there are things that I didn't accomplish, of course. We all are going to have these on occasion, and this is an opportunity to learn about myself. So an example of this is I set a goal to write for 1 hour every day. And yes, I had to pivot. 1 day a week is not sustainable for me. I cannot do anything every day forever. It's just not going to happen. So what I was able to do is hire a babysitter and take a whole day and do several hours of writing in one sitting. And that works really well for my process. When I can get into the creative flow, I can go, and go. For me, it's a barrier to entry to start every single day, and it takes time to get into that creative flow state. So having 1 day a week dedicated to writing has improved my writing, first of all, because I'm able to sit down without distractions. And then that has honored my creative energy or flow state or whatever you want to call it. And I end up writing throughout the week randomly. My end goal was to become a better writer. I thought that writing 1 hour a day would be the path to get there. What's turned out is I took a different path, but it's worked better for me. And so in the end, I still consider that a win, even though the specific planned goal that I set, I did not accomplish. Another one that I simply did not do is waking up extra early in the morning to get stuff done before everyone wakes up. Maybe it's laziness. Maybe it's honoring my body. I think it's probably both. I've had some health needs come up that required more sleep and more coping. And I'm also learning to let go of that belief that rising early in the morning is the morally superior thing to do. So I didn't accomplish that goal. But again, the greater goal of becoming a better person and finding time to meditate and create and all those things, I did. So I feel good about that. Next, I review my core values. So this goes back to what we talked about in season 2, episode 8, and a little bit in season 2, episode 10, if you want to reference those. But my core values are independence, growth, and service. And if you don't have those nailed down, that really has to happen first. In order for your goals to really be sustainable and long-lasting, you got to know your core values, because this is going to be the why you're setting this goal. And it's going to be what helps keep you going long-term. So once I review those core values, I decide, how do I want to practice and exercise these core values over the coming year? And this year I decided to divide it up into 5 different categories: physical, mental, spiritual, social, and emotional. So I take my core values and I apply them to these different areas of life. And I actually do this on a chart. I get out a piece of lined paper and I write independence, growth, and service across the top. And then along the side, all those different areas and applications. So physical, mental, spiritual, social, emotional. And I use it just like you do a chart. I say, how am I going to practice independence in my physical space? How am I going to practice growth in my physical space? How am I going to practice service in my physical space? And I cross apply all these different areas. And what it does is, a lot of these goals that I've set, I would have already made. I would have already set podcasting goals without this process. I would have already set a meditation goal. I would have already set like an exercise goal. But what this does is it allows me to see the why and also push me to grow in different aspects. I'll give some examples. So when I look at my independence value and I look at how I'm going to be exercising that in my social space, that kind of gives me pause. What is practicing independence in my social world look like? Well, what I'm deciding it looks like this year is I'm going to continue to host my book club, and I'm in charge of that. It's my baby. And so that is a way for me to practice independence in the form of leadership and still do it in the social sphere. Interestingly enough, the application of service and social was also an interesting one to think through. How am I going to practice service in the social sphere? And what I decided is to volunteer to plan a reunion for me and my college friends. I'm really lucky in that my sophomore year, I had 5 fantastic roommates that I'm still really close with, and we all had these busy lives. And we've gotten together every other year for the last 10 years. But obviously with COVID, that has really changed things. And we're really anxious to get together as soon as we can. And we're all really busy. So I've decided to provide the service of planning this social event. And it's something that would have happened anyway. But when I look at it through the lens of my core values and my goals, it allows me to step into this space without any kind of resentment at all, because I am the one that gets things done in this group. I'm the planner. If you ask any of them, they're all amazing women. They're all getting things done, but I am the one that's like, okay, let's plan this. Let's make it happen. Let's move it forward. And so I serve the same function that I would probably otherwise be serving, but it also is helping me grow in the areas that I have set. And so the why behind it, I'm serving my friends. This is a way for me to love them. This is something I can do to support our friendship. And it's just a really cool way to be able to view this activity through. So after I make that chart to come up with all these different ways that I want to grow this year, I just continue to brainstorm in each of these sections. And there's no right or wrong way to do this. This is an idea flow. There's no obligation. And then I add in that brain dump that I did at the beginning and plug it into the different categories that it fits into. And then once I have all of those ideas on the paper, I go back to that big dream life that I want to have and ask myself, which of these goals and which of these areas can I use to stretch myself and grow into that person that I want to become, grow into that dream, grow into the space that I want to exist in. And this becomes the why. I'm going to use an example from my own chart here that is a very common goal to set for a New Year's resolution: exercise, right? Everyone wants to exercise more in the coming year. And so I ask myself, why? What's the bigger goal behind that idea? Because I'm growing in my physical space, I'm serving in my physical space, but why does it fit those categories? And how does it help me become that dream version of myself that I want to be? Is it because I want to look a certain way? Do I want to feel a certain way? And so when I pause and look at that, I can come up with the why. So for growth in my physical space, I want to continue to be healthy. I want to continue to maximize my body's performance and experience and enjoyment. And in order to do that, I have to move my body. It helps me maintain my blood sugar. It helps me maintain mental wellness. And it will allow me to do all the other things that I really want to do. For practicing service in my physical space, having a healthy body will allow me to serve other people on a moment's notice. It helps me do that in my own home with my children or with my friends and family and community. Thinking specifically about teaching my kids how to ski, I want to be physically fit enough to stay out with them on the mountain all day long and to teach them and support them and carry their water and their snacks so that we can go out and have a really great time. And that's my why. And so when I have the opportunity to exercise, maybe I'm waking up early, or my alternate activity might be staying at home reading a book. It might be tempting to say, I don't really want to exercise today. But when I remember it in terms of my values, it helps me think larger and think of that larger goal that I want to do. I want to be physically fit to stick around and be with my family for a long time. I want to be able to serve my community and be present and get the things done that I want to do. And so that gives me that extra push in that moment to say, no, I'm going to go exercise. I'm going to go do the thing that I committed to do. Now, setting a goal to exercise is extremely vague. We're going to keep going with this example because it's a classic. Exercising more, way too vague. It's not even really a goal until you apply some more specifics to it. And so I make each of my goals SMART. This is not my idea. This has been around for a long time. SMART is an acronym for goal setting. It stands for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. And so using the exercise example for specific, I'm going to work out in one of these ways. And I made a list of different ideas of exercises I can do, activities. We have a Just Dance. That's a great cardio workout activity. I have yoga classes that I can go and do. I have a 2-mile loop that I like to do around our neighborhood. And that list is flexible and it can grow. It's more of a place for me to get ideas from when I am unmotivated and I am having trouble being creative. I can just go to that list, pick something, go and do it. It also needs to be measurable. So for exercise, I can say I did one of these activities on this list. It's something I can check off. I can tag it as a workout on my Apple Watch and also see the stats there, which I love stats. Seriously, that's sometimes a motivation in and of itself to compete against myself. For achievable, working out, so my goal is to work out 3 times a week. We'll get to the time-bound part. But for me, that is a stretch from last year. It's not a leap. In years past, my ambitious goal has needed to be to move my body the least amount possible. When I was on bed rest with my kiddos, I got my first, what was it? It's one of those earlier age workout watches, a Fitbit. I got my Fitbit, and my goal was to get as few steps in as possible. And I would track that, and I would celebrate the days when I got as few steps in as possible, because I was not supposed to move at all. Coming off of bed rest, coming off of muscle atrophy from 6 months in bed, taking as few steps as physically possible, I would not be able to make the jump to exercising 3 times a week. That would not be an achievable goal. But I've worked up slowly over time. And so working out 3 times a week from this list that I've made is a stretch from last year. It is achievable because it is a doable next step. I'm not going to go enter a bodybuilding competition this year. That would be too big of a leap. If that was something I really wanted to do, I could work up to that probably over a couple years, and I would need a coach and I'd need all these things, but it's not something that I can just set as a goal. So making sure it's achievable. The next is making sure it's relevant. And this is where those core values come in. If this goal is meeting a bigger dream of health, I am so much more likely to stretch and reach for it because it is feeding into all of the other things I'm trying to do. And a very important time bound. For me, for exercise, my goal is to do this 3 times a week over the next year. It's specific, it's measurable, and I am going to plan it in when I plan out my weeks on Sundays, and I will figure out what 3 activities I'm going to do this week to meet this goal. Now, something I feel like we skip over as a human race, especially when we're setting goals. We get so psyched up to take these next steps and to stretch ourselves and continue and move forward, and we put our head down and we just want to go, go, go. And then when we hit a roadblock, it totally throws us off balance, and it's easy to think, I failed at this goal, I can't do it. So in the last couple of years with COVID, if my plan is to go to the gym 3 days a week and the gym is closed, who would have ever foreseen an instance where all of the gyms would be closed, right? We have to make space in our goal setting for pivots, even if it's just a mental grace. We have to maybe think through some plan Bs or just allow ourselves to change throughout the year. So if my goal that I write down is to go to the gym 3 times a week and then suddenly all the gyms closed, it might be tempting to think, oh, see, I can't do it. I'm done. My goal has been thwarted. This is out of my control. But if I allow for pivots, I can say, shoot, the gym's closed, but I can do X, Y, and Z activities. I can walk around in my neighborhood. I can do this yoga video. I can run up and down the stairs, which I definitely did during COVID. I made my kids do it too. Making space for those changes throughout the year is really important, and it only works if you have the bigger goal in mind. If you're just setting goals to set goals, the second you hit a roadblock, you're just going to discard it because it's not doable. But if my larger goal is to become healthier, then I can pivot along the way. Another area I feel like is easy to skip over, especially if you're really ambitious and motivated and you're into personal development and you're into growth and you're into making it happen like I am. If you're like a pushy type personality, it's really easy to skip over holding space, not only for the need to pivot unforeseeable events, but also unforeseeable things that we get to receive and have in our life. If an unforeseen trip came up, or I was introduced to a new sport, or I got some kind of new toy that helped me expand what exercise might mean for me, I definitely want to continue to allow space to include that in my life and allow that to help me meet my goals. Another example of this is my podcast. My original goal was to network with more amazing women, to contribute to the world and discover more about myself. Now, when I went about brainstorming for how to network with more amazing women, the first thing that came up to my mind was, oh, I'll go out to lunch once a week. I'll invite these different women to go out to lunch. Well, that wasn't going to happen with COVID. So I needed something that I could do from home that would still add up to some kind of a contribution and help me discover more about myself. And I couldn't foresee what that was going to look like. I didn't have any desires or a way to kind of bring that all together. But I went ahead and I wrote it down, even though it's not, one of those SMART goals. It was something that I was going to allow to continue to evolve and hold space for and manifest, if you want to call it that. And it's really interesting because I looked in my journal And I remembered that the podcast, my first episodes came out in February, but I didn't remember exactly where my initial idea for the podcast had come from. And when I went back in my journals, it was actually late January that I first had this idea, and I wrote it down. And within a week of that, I already had 2 guests scheduled. I had already made massive progress. I had already got the Instagram handle and was working on the RSS feed, and I had done all these things. But when I made that goal to network and contribute and discover more about myself back in December, I had no idea that podcasting could be a possible answer for me. And it did fix a lot of problems, right? Podcasting is something I can do regardless of the pandemic. It's all online. I can still network. I can still meet with people. We're all familiar with Zoom. Holding space to have something materialize during the year ended up becoming the answer to that goal and a path to achieve that end goal that I really wanted. And so make sure you're holding space to receive things throughout the year, even if you can't foresee them. Because if you're nailing down your time so completely, you're scheduling out every moment of life, you're coming back to your goals without allowing yourself to step back and look at the bigger picture, those are the kinds of things that you're going to skip and you're going to miss because they don't fit into what you could see back in December. And we live 12 months out of the year, not 1 month out of the year. And so we have to be able to hold space for those things that come up. So with the dreams and goals and manifestations all in mind at this point, I really love to create a vision board that encapsulates the energy that I want to take into the next year. This is a really fun thing that I do with my kids. It's really, really accessible to them and to me. And I actually save up magazines a couple months leading up to it so we can cut out pictures and cut out words and put them on a poster board and hang it up somewhere that we can view it throughout the year. So for exercising and just health in general as part of what I want to include in my life, I will cut out pictures of like mountain hikers with friends and activities and words that I want to experience, or, pictures of skiing or whatever it is. Pre-pandemic, I had written down that I really wanted to do road trips with my family. I had no idea the pandemic was coming. I had no idea we were going to be buying an RV and live in it out of 9 months out of the year, visit something like 42 states and 38 national parks. I had no idea that was going to be the path that I took to achieving that goal, but I really wanted to travel with my family. And that's another example of holding space and pivoting along the way. But the vision boards really do work. There's some really interesting, incredible, funny stories that come from vision boards. But it's a fun thing that I like to do. And then in addition to that, and you can even do it in the same space if you want to, but writing down goals and keeping it in an easy to reference place. I write them in my journal, and then I put them on a piece of paper that I keep in my bedroom, sometimes sticky notes next to my bed or on the mirror. For me, though, with my brain, I have to keep it in a spot that I can easily reference, but also change up the location and change up the method for reminding me of my goals. Otherwise, my brain will just delete out the sticky note on my mirror that's been there for 6 months. I just won't even see it, and that's a fun ADHD thing that I'm learning about. And then I also make sure to keep a copy of it with my scheduling notebook that I have, where each Sunday I sit down and I plan my week out. And that's where I reference my core values and say, okay, how am I going to exercise each of these this week? I can reference back to my goals and make sure that I'm making the progress that I really want to make. And then with that, it's also, I obviously like to look at these things from every single possible angle. And so I also recategorize things into what are regular goals, like weekly things, exercise, meditation, ADHD management, and self-education, and then cyclical goals that come more like monthly. I have a self-care ritual around my menstruation. I have publication goals. I have podcasting goals. And then there's one-time goals, hiking around the lake near my house. I have a emotional check-in system that I want to create with my kids, and that's something I need to like cut out and laminate and put on the wall and tell them about, and it'll just be there. I also want to just create a fun party and host it just for fun. And that's something that I will do once and be done. And then there are achievements that maybe are an event, but are going to have a lot of baby steps and their own goals associated with. So I'm on the board for a publishing and media association, and I'm going to be hosting a gala in the fall. And so there is a ton of work that has to be done and a whole set of goals and timeline associated with that. Different milestones I have with the podcast. There's a lot of work that goes into all of that. Planning trips, lots of work that goes into that, but it's still a timeline event. And so I keep a list of those weekly goals, monthly goals, one-time goals, and ongoing larger goals with my scheduling stuff so I can reference it frequently. Next, I look back to my SMART goals and I take whatever action steps are needed to set up for success. So with the exercise example, maybe I need new running shoes, or I need cheap sunglasses, or I need a gym pass, or I need, in my case, access to the gym class schedule, which has been kind of a nightmare, but I sat down and I did it. So now I have it moving forward. And in the end of all of this work and this analysis and looking at these goals and values and aspects of my life from every possible angle, in the end, I have this life that I'm creating with purpose and intention, goals that are supported by the deeper whys of my life, a way to keep track of the progress, reminders, and support that's set up for me to achieve. And then I'm set up for the new year when I am ready to set goals for the next year. I have all of this recorded. I can reference it and I can really see how much life has changed. I don't have enough space in my brain to keep all of these things in check all the time. And when I sit down and I review the year previous, I'm always surprised where I came from. I'm surprised at the things that are still important to me. And I can give myself credit for the human I'm becoming because I really love who I'm becoming. And I really love learning about myself and being able to compare what I thought was going to work and what actually worked and what things I had to change and what things I failed at. Those are all opportunities for me to learn more about myself that are just going to benefit me in the future. So that's my goal setting process. I know it's very intense. I know it's very extra. I hope there was something in there that is useful for you. Next week, we're going to hear from Shay Dominguez on some of her big goals and what helped her accomplish those things. Specifically, her story of growing up in a really small town, accomplishing and achieving according to her parents' desires, realizing that she was gay in the process, wanting more for herself, moving across country and chasing dreams, moving to LA, becoming a comedian, pushing herself, growing herself in all kinds of ways that she had never considered before. Her story is awesome. It's a really great chat. I'm really excited to share that. We'll have more stories like this in the coming weeks. If you or someone you know would love to speak more about their goal setting process, the application of ambition inside of relationships, health, careers, play, or service in the world, contact me at Women of Ambition Podcast. We're on Instagram, online, womenofambitionpodcast.com. So thanks for listening, and I look forward to next week.